The Ugly Duckling. Once there was a little farm, with a pond full of geese and ducks. On a fine morning in May, a duck sitting on her nest full of eggs felt something start to move underneath her. Crack, crack, crack. Peep, peep. Her eggs were beginning to hatch. She was very glad, for it seemed as though she had been sitting on the nest for a long, long time. One by one, her ducklings broke through their eggshells, and each was yellower and fluffier and softer than the one before. Finally, the last egg started to crack open. It was a very big egg, and the duckling that came out was large and clumsy and a dirty gray color. He did not look like the other ducklings at all. The mother duck thought, "How big and ugly he is!" But she loved him just the same. And when she led her babies to the pond, the ugly duckling swam just as well as the rest. The next day, the duck took her babies home to the farmyard. She lined the ducklings up in a neat row and told them to quack properly to everyone they met. When the little family entered the yard, the other ducks were quite rude. "Look at that ugly one. He's not one of us," said the ducks, and one even bit him on his long neck. "Leave him alone," cried his mother. But the others continued to tease the poor duckling. Even his brothers and sisters called him ugly and wouldn't play with him. As the days passed, the duckling grew bigger and more ugly, and the teasing and bullying got worse and worse. Finally, he decided to run away. The duckling wandered through overgrown fields, often frightening the little birds who lived there. "They think I'm ugly too," he sighed. On he went, until he came to a swamp where wild geese lived. Since he was too tired to go any farther, he stayed there for the night. The wild geese found him in the morning. "What kind of bird are you?" they asked. But before he could answer, some men came with their dogs and frightened the geese away. The ugly duckling hid in the weeds, for he was too frightened to leave. As soon as he was sure the dogs were gone, the lonely little duckling set off again, looking for someone to keep him company. At last he came to a crooked little hut, where an old woman lived with her cat and her prize hen. She took him in, hoping he would grow fat, so she could sell him at market. Now the cat and the hen thought they were wonderful creatures, and they were very rude to the duckling. Besides, he was a wild bird, and although the hut was warm and dry, he longed to be out on the water, diving down among the weeds. So one fall day, he ran away to find a lake. And find one he did. He was happier on his lake, though the wild ducks there never spoke to him. They thought he was too ugly to bother with. One day at sunset, a flock of beautiful birds flew overhead. Their feathers were so white they glowed, and their necks were long and graceful. The sight of them made the ugly duckling cry, though he did not know why. Soon afterward, the wild ducks flew off, for they knew that winter was coming. The duckling stayed in the lake as it got colder and colder. It grew so cold one night that the duckling awoke to find his feet frozen in a sheet of ice. Luckily, a farmer found the duckling there and broke the ice, freeing him. The kind man took him home, thinking the funny-looking bird would make a fine pet for his children. But when the farmer set the duckling down in his kitchen, the noisy children frightened the bird and he flew right into a pail of milk. From there, he ran across a plate of butter and knocked over a bowl of flour. What a mess he made! The farmer's wife chased him right out the kitchen door. The frightened duckling found a hiding place nearby, where he stayed all winter. He only came out to find food. It was the longest, loneliest winter you can imagine. Finally, spring came, and the duckling stretched his neck and tried to fly. How strong his wings were! How easily he landed on his little lake! Just as the lonely bird was enjoying his first swim of the new year, 3 snowy swans appeared from out of the shadows. The duckling felt the same strange excitement he had felt when he first saw them overhead. He wanted to be near them so much that, even though he was sure they would treat him cruelly, he swam over to them. As he drew near, he bowed his head, ready for the name calling and biting he had learned to expect from other water birds. But when he lowered his head, a fourth swan, the most beautiful of them of all, was looking back at him from the water. It was his own reflection. You see, over that long winter, the ugly duckling had grown up. He was not a duckling at all, but a swan. It doesn't matter if you're born in a duck's nest, if you come from a swan's egg. As the other swans joined him, the happy bird promised himself that he would never forget the things he had learned as the ugly duckling, even though he would spend the rest of his life as a handsome swan.